I am LaShawn Edwards. This is my 10th year teaching. I am the ENL teacher, English as a New Language, and the school that I teach at is the Urban Assembly School for the Performing Arts. As a student, I love to read. I was an introvert, so I just love being at home reading, and in school we read a lot of male authors. I love murder mysteries, so that's what I would read all the time. I found out about other authors in, I want to say 10th grade. I think this was biology class. And my science teacher just pulled myself and another student aside and asked us, do we know anything about Toni Morrison? So my very first book that I read from Toni Morrison was Beloved. I must admit, I did not like it, but I liked her writing, her craftsmanship, and it opened my eyes to other authors, especially women authors that I hadn't been introduced to as a younger child. What I love about teaching ENL is just the students. You know, they come here for different reasons, but they all want a better life. You know, they're so determined. They are full of love. They just want to learn. They want to soak up everything I have to offer them. So that makes me want to be a better teacher. You know, I want to find books, stories, just works of art that I know that they can relate to and that they are going to love and that they want to enjoy as students. So when we were online just browsing through the different stories, the title alone caught my interest. I was like, none of your business. Like, oh, what is this about? And then when I just started reading it, and I'm like, wow, this little boy, York, like, he's so cool. You know, he made these like tough choices at such a young age that no child that young should be making. You know, like that age, you know, he's in first grade. Like, you should be focused on colors, learning, you know, your numbers. And he's making such adult choices. So that was a real interest to me. And I'm like, my kids are going to love this story. And then A Failed Journey, again, McDonald's. I was like, what child does not love McDonald's? Very relatable right there. I would like to start with the first paragraph of A Failed Journey because it kind of introduces us to the main character, Odette. And that first sentence alone pretty much describes my students and their journey. They warned her that one more offense against good behavior in the promised trip to the promised land, the United States, will be canceled, and to please return the mechanical pencil she flinched from her classmate Agne's backpack during recess. Agnes, who was sobbing inconsolably like a coward in the arms of fat Miss Becky in the corner of the classroom. The little brat, without any trace of shame or guilt, slowly pulled a Superman refillable mechanical pencil from under her flag green sweater and extended her hand towards the principal. Now you can leave. And she went out into the beige hallway. She was followed by a still teary-eyed Agnes. This can't go on like this. Yesterday it was Anna Maria's thermos. The day before yesterday, graffiti on the wall. Last week, Marisol's Wonder Woman ruler, and today, this. The principal's voice had been full of reproach, as if Odette's failed thefts were her parents' fault. Leaving the office, her parents held her hands and took her home without saying a word. They were looking at her as if they had a total stranger before them. So what I do is, before we start reading, we usually have I give them like a question, a prompt question, and one of the questions was, here's an image. It was the arches, the golden arches, and what do you know about the golden arches, and can you tell me what your first experience was? So I give them a few minutes to talk about it, and they get to talk about it in their native language, and then I have them write it down. Everyone wanted to share out. They was like, oh my God, my first time at McDonald's was for my birthday, or we went for a celebration. And, they were just going on and on. And I just, I let them because they were just so happy. And then I was like, okay, so now we're going to read, this story about this young girl. and her felt journey. And then I asked them, like, if I say felt journey, what does that mean? And once they started reading it, they were like hooked. Oh, they loved it. When one of the activities was to give advice to Odette, the main character, you know, as her big sibling, and they went in the writing, you know, like she shouldn't do this, you know, she has to listen to her parents. And in both groups, my students respect their parents so much. So they were more upset with her because she was acting out. For None of Your Business, the students they understood where York was coming from and the choices he made, but they all agreed that they would not have made the same choice that he did. We discussed the characters, you know, we discussed like, what would you do? I gave them different scenarios because it was a little bit more relatable, because a lot of them have, you know, they struggle with their parents, and what should they do if they're not okay with something that they, you know, mom or dad says to them. They respected him, they felt he was brave, but they all of them was like, you must respect your parents no matter what they do to you. But they could understand why he did what he did. Paragraph 3, they talk about Odetta's sister introduced. And what was interesting, they don't mention her name. And the students were wondering why, is she, then they realized that because Odette was the main character, that her sister's name really wasn't that important. So the writing question was, the prompt was, what do you think is happening to Odette? If you were her older sibling, what advice would you give Odette and why? The student I chose today is a smart student, but sometimes doesn't like to come to class or comes to class late. So I knew that this story would be a good story for the student because the student loves to eat. And since the focus of the story was about McDonald's, I was like, oh great, perfect. I did the cheat chart for the assignment, you know, comparing the two sisters and, you know, compare and contrast. How were they similar? How were they not? And then the advice for the third paragraph. And her advice was amazing. So this student had said, I think Odette doesn't want to leave her country. She loves where she's at, and she really doesn't care to go to the United States. If I was Odette's older sister, I would tell her that she has to behave because our parents know what is best for us. That stealing from her classmates is not right, that it is wrong. Odette didn't have to do what she did. She could have just spoken to our parents. I would tell her that speaking up for herself is good, and that if she continues to misbehave, then she will not be able to go to New York and she will not get the toys that she wants. She was wanting to read out her response, and it was just great to really see her like shine and, you know, just take over the period. And I just love that for her. I plan to continue, you know, using Words Without Borders and choosing stories that, you know, my students are gonna love, and, you know, designing lessons and activities around these stories. I want them to read, you know, and they all read, like everyone wanted to read. So when they have interesting, you know, stories in front of them, you don't have to do the work. They're doing it all from themselves. It is student led because, like I said before, like they can relate to them. These are stories written by people that look like them, about students, children that look like them. And what more can you ask for?